Welcome to this webinar, and I appreciate that you're joining me today. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and you'll hear more about that as we go throughout this presentation, because I see a lot in the job that I do, a lot with our teens, a lot with our parents, and so I'm really here to be of service to you, so please let me know how I can best support you. So my first question for you, which I'd love for you to write in the chat box here, is what brought you here today? Like, why did you take time out of your super busy schedule, out of your busy life, to come and listen to this webinar? So as we know, the title is Creating Space for Your Teens' Inner Joy. And for some of you, you may have seen kind of the second part of that, the subtitle, which was how to prioritize joy over achievement while still fostering motivation and personal success. So what was it about that that kind of drew you in to talk about this, to have this discussion? So one person says, understanding how to give the right kind of space for your daughter. And we're definitely going to dive into that, because when I say space, it doesn't mean just hands up, you go do whatever you want to. There is a certain kind of support that we have to lend to our teens to give them the space to become who they are, but also we have to guide them. We have to be there for them. A lot of people think you hit middle school and high school and they're on their own, but it's really, they need you so much more during those times, even though it may not feel like it. Molly says, how to balance being an involved great mom, but letting your daughter grow and learn. Yes, and I like the word involved versus intruding and controlling. Involved is a whole different way of parenting, and that's what we want to be involved and to be supportive and be available while not taking over and taking charge. All right, so my next question for you is, what does it mean for you to have inner joy? What does even that concept mean? You must have had some sort of idea of what it meant in order to come and join me for this webinar, right? And then the next question, I know we're here to talk about teens and parenting, but when was the last time that you felt pure inner joy? And what was it that you were doing? Because it's so important that you recognize what it feels like so that we know the importance for our own kids. And then the last question, when was the last time you saw your child's inner joy come out? And what were they doing? So I want you to keep those things in mind. Some of you may have downloaded there's a download, and if you didn't get it, if you go back to the registration, one of your emails will have a link to this download. This is kind of some of the questions I'm going to ask you as we go. If you don't have it, don't worry. It's not a problem at all. You can just write down on a piece of paper, just write in the chat here. But that is something that can kind of, you can follow along with as we go. All right, so let's see. Inner joy, Molly. You put inner joy, but there's nothing after that. So what do you have to say about inner joy? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Are you just contemplating that, starting to think about that? All right, so I speak about 20-something times a year. And in a group of, let's say, 50 parents, what I find is 3 or 4, maybe 5, will raise their hand quickly when I ask this question about what they've done to spark their own inner joy. It's something that we as parents are kind of forgetting about for ourselves, and we have to realize that we're role modeling that for our kids as well. So don't fret if you are one of those parents that didn't have an answer for that, or if you don't know what brings your kid inner joy. That's what we're going to talk about today. So my goal is not to freak you out by the end of this and have you, with full-blown anxiety. My purpose of doing this webinar is to show you that there are ways we can change up our parenting to bring that inner joy into our own homes and families. All right, so Molly, you had a moment to think, and you said stress-free, peaceful, feeling loved. Inner child joy is laughing so hard you cry. Oh, yes, that's such a good feeling. I have 3 daughters of my own. Currently, they're 15, 18, and 20. And my middle daughter is at UW now, so she's kind of stressed out with college. But when she came home one weekend, we sat down and we watched a comedy show that she chose, and she was just laughing so hard. And it was so great to see that inner joy and to be able to sit there with her. It was not a comedian I ever would have chosen to watch, but it was her choice. And we sat down and we had that moment together. And, I loved actually the comedian it turned out, but it was so great to just see her laugh and to be a part of that. So that's what we want to kind of foster in your families. Jennifer says, inner joy is when her daughter makes cookies with me. Oh my gosh, we were just talking about this last night. My daughter was like, let's make chocolate chip cookies. So we have butter thawing or kind of defrosting on the counter ready for cookies. So yes, I totally get that. All right, so I'm going to share my screen now with you so that you can get the PowerPoint slides here. So if you can just let me know in the chat that you're seeing the slides, that would be helpful. I want to make sure I'm not kind of just acting like you're seeing the slides and you're not. Okay, great. So here we go. This is what I have noticed in all of my years working with teens and even younger kids and parents, is that right now there is so much focus on college, that we as parents are in this rat race with our kids, that we just feel like we need to make sure that they get into college. And Rachel Simmons, who wrote Odd Girl Out, and she wrote Enough As She Is, 2 books I highly recommend, by the way, she refers to it as the college industrial application process. It's like this industrial machine. You know, there's so many moving parts to it. And, you know, we all saw the story yesterday, I'm sure, about the college cheating scandal where high-powered people are paying big bucks to fraudulently get their kids into college. So this college industrial, you know, application process is huge. And we as parents are feeling that pressure. And you know what happens? Those pressures go onto our kids as well. And here's the thing, many of us, many parents believe that if our kids don't get straight A's, they're not going to get into the good college. And if they don't get into the good college, they're not going to be successful. And I see why we get caught up in this, but we have to really check ourselves as parents of, are we believing this myth, first of all, and also, are we passing this pressure down to our kids? All right, so this is what I see. Focusing on living for the college application, even from a young age. I see this stuff as young as 6. We're already talking about it with our preschoolers, with our kindergartners. This is what's happening. Anxiety and depression are at an all-time high. No surprise. You guys have seen all of the articles on this. You've seen the stats come through. Our kids are filled with anxiety and they are depressed. There's a lack of excitement. Like our kids, when they were little, they were excited to learn and to explore and do new things. When you hit middle and high school, most of the kids have lost that excitement. And we're not creating a space for them to find the things that create joy because we have them busy, 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 busy. And there's just that diminishment of inner joy. You see a spark in like a 4-year-old, and then you come back and see that same kid when they're 12, and there's that spark is just, it's getting squished. So here's the thing though, inner joy is what creates motivation and perseverance and resilience and all those things that we want in our kids so that they'll be successful. It's what lights up their soul. It's what sparks creativity and energy. And it's, in the long run, inner joy is what is going to make our kids successful. So let me share a personal story with you. As I said, I have 3 kids and my oldest is 20. Now, Jordan she tests really high on all of like the standardized tests and everything, but Jordan is not someone who enjoyed academics. Jordan didn't put her all into her coursework. She didn't get all A's, not because she wasn't capable enough, but because she chose not to spend her time doing all of these assignments that she felt were not important. Now, what happened in our family was that, and yes, I will mention those 2 books, Kelly, I promise. What happened was for Jordan is she very carefully decided how much time to spend on assignments, knowing how many points they were worth. Now, my husband got really entrenched in this process, which I know a lot of parents do, and maybe some of you as well, where he was checking her grades online every day and then would go and quiz her or, you know, interrogate her about what was missing or why was this grade low. So what happened was their entire relationship for a while was centered around her academic grades. Meanwhile, their relationship was suffering terribly because it was all about this friction about grades. And yeah, so it was a terrible path that the 2 were going on, and it was awful to see as a mom watching their relationship disintegrate. Now, some changes were made, thank goodness, and their relationship was healed. And Jordan really flourished when she was given the space that she needed to do the thing she wanted, which was art. She loves, absolutely loves art, has had a sketchbook in her hand since she was little, definitely has her 10,000 hours in already. But if we would have kept down that typical path of pushing her to get straight A's because we knew she had the potential to do it, her mental health would have suffered, her art skills and love for art would have suffered, and basically her source of inner joy would have been completely overshadowed by this idea that my husband had that she needed to get all A's. So lucky for her, I've got a master's degree in counseling psych, and I'm a teen life coach, and I've read tons of books, and I've read the research, and so I was able to help them to heal that relationship. And thank goodness, because Jordan now is in her 3rd year of college. She's at DigiPen, which is a very highly focused college on video games. She's doing the art process, and it's a very difficult college to be in. It's a lot of coursework, but it's her passion. So she does it all. She spending long hours doing the projects that she needs because she was allowed to follow the path of her inner joy. So it makes me so happy to know that this is possible, that she doesn't have to get all A's. She did not have a high GPA, but she's exactly where she needs to be. All right, and yes, that's your husband, Kelly. So yeah, Kelly, so you can coach your husband on how to deal with this stuff after this. And let's see, yes, the 2 books were Odd Girl Out and Enough As She Is. I highly, highly recommend those. There's also another one by Rachel called The Curse of the Good Girl. I really like those. And I have a lot of book recommendations. So if you want to see those book recommendations, you can go to my website. I have a lot listed. If there's another specific area that you want a book recommendation, just let me know. I have read so many books. I have bookshelves all over, and I actually have them cataloged. So just let me know what you need, and I will get you some recommendations, okay? All right, so here's the thing. More than college, what really matters is what our kids are doing. What are they doing in their life? What are they doing at school? What are they doing at college? Not what grades they're getting and what courses they're taking. It's what they're doing. It's the connections that they're making. We all know that networking is important. It's the excitement that we're allowing them to have in their lives, the time to be curious. We're giving them those opportunities. Even the projects they're choosing. When they're choosing projects in school, can they choose something that is exciting them? Like every single subject that they have, there's something that they could choose that would create excitement for them, and their passions. They just have to be able to explore what their passions are. We have this idea right now that our kids need to know at 10 what their passions are, and this isn't the case. We need to give them space to explore what those passions are. And it doesn't stop at 10, it doesn't stop at 18. However old you are, you probably are still exploring what your passions are, and they change over time. So we need to give our kids the space to explore those passions, all right? A recent article in the New York Times by Adam Grant, and also the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, which probably some of you have read, they both talk about this very thing, that it's not GPAs that really can dictate success or that can predict success. It's more about the excitement and the passion that our kids have. So that's what we want them to have, especially going into college. All right, some of you may not be buying this. You're like, yeah, whatever. We need our kids to get straight A's. We need them to get into these good colleges. But let me give you some examples, okay? And I know that these faces are familiar to you. So J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, if you don't know, she graduated with a C average. And clearly she is successful. Steve Jobs had a 2.6 GPA in high school. It wasn't his grades that got him to where he was. It was his excitement and curiosity. Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., he only received 1 A while he was at Morehouse. Bill Gates, as we know, started at Harvard and then he dropped out. Ellen DeGeneres dropped out of college at the University of New Orleans. And Oprah, ultimate female success, right? She went to Tennessee State University, which was a good university, but it's not what we would consider a good, quote, university, right? So the average GPA of US millionaires is about, or was about 2.9. So we got to get rid of this idea that a high GPA equals success. It's putting a lot of pressure on our kids, I'll tell you that. Okay, now these photos here, this is what I see from parents, and sometimes they keep it on the inside, but we are freaked out. Collectively, we are freaked out, not just about school, but we're freaked out about vaping, we're freaked out about smoking pot, about drinking, about dating, sex, all these things. We are just freaked out. And what's happening is this is kind of trickling down to our kids who are then freaking out. I hear it every day with the kids that I'm talking to. So I understand some of this freak out comes from this thought that you want your kids to achieve. We all want our kids to achieve because we want them to be happy, right? We want our kids to not be left behind. We want them to not do things, to make choices that take away some opportunities. And we have a fear that our kids won't go to college or that they won't be successful. But we can't parent from a place of fear. There's definite peer pressure, parent peer pressure that I see, that I'll hear parents talk about, oh, my kid's seeing a tutor, and the parents around, oh, what tutor are you seeing? I didn't think about a tutor. I need to get that tutor lined up. Or if your kid's in sports, they want to get that extra coach for that private coaching so that their kid can be better and have more opportunities. So we just need to be mindful of that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, of how we support our kids. But I want you to take a second right now to reflect on your parenting, because parenting is such a busy thing that we kind of just get into it day to day, kind of survival mode almost, that we don't have time to stop and reflect on our parenting. So we're going to take just a minute to do that and to reflect on what's working and what's not working right now in your household. So basically, I want you to think for a moment about, what have you tried? What are you currently trying or doing as a parent in your household that is not working? And there's probably something that brought you here today that you can kind of say, oh, that's why I wanted to be here, because this is happening. It might be that your daughter's withdrawing, that your son is getting, aggressive. It might be that you feel disconnected from your daughter or your son. So think about, what is it that you're doing that is working and what is not working. And again, if you can share those in the chat, that would be very helpful. So likely what you'll find, the things that are not working will fall under like the 3 C's, which is confinement, constraint, and control. This idea of us trying to keep our kids contained is what can cause a lot of the friction in our household, can reduce the inner joy that our teens are able to feel, and can just really cause a lot of anxiety for us as parents and for our teens. And here's the thing, like, think about if somebody walks up to you and pushes you, kind of like really with a hard push. You're going to feel unsteady. You're going to fall back. And some of you may push back. And that's what our kids are going to do. Either they're going to feel unsteady when we're just pushing them, or they're going to push back. Sometimes it's obvious in your face pushback, rebellion. Other times it's very quietly behind the scenes rebellion that you as a parent may not even know about. Okay, so what can we do instead? I think this is important, not just to say, okay, this is what we're doing, oh my gosh, that's not working. We need to think about what we can do. And so let me tell you about one of my clients in particular. So this mom and daughter came in. The mom was fantastic. I mean, all the moms I work with are great. They're there because they are well-intentioned and want to make a difference in their teen's life. So this mom and daughter came in, and they were in there because the daughter was feeling very anxious about a lot of things in life. A real perfectionist. Like if they were going to a band concert, there was anxiety of it. Would she do well enough? If there was a project, would she do well enough? So anything that she was doing, was she going to do it well enough? And what was happening was the mom was also anxious about her daughter's anxiety. So it became this snowball effect that the daughter was anxious, the mom was anxious, that her daughter was going to be anxious, and then the daughter became anxious about her mom getting upset about the anxiety. As you can see, it just goes on and on. So through coaching, we were able to kind of extricate these two things going on and give the mom permission to not fix it, and to just be there to support her daughter through it. And just with that one change, their relationship changed and the anxiety diminished tremendously. So this is just an example of these small changes that we can make. I mean, that was pretty much a mindset change and a reactionary change, and it really helped both the mom and the daughters. And she's doing really well, by the way. So you might be thinking right now that, well, my kid's high achieving, great grades, you know, in sports, captain of the team, I have no problems. And that may be true, but this is what I'm seeing with the super high achieving kids. Think of them as this, you know, visual here with the person in a jar with the lid screwed on pretty tightly. Our high achievers are in this jar, and they're very tightly contained, and they are high achievers. That's their label. So they're going to do everything to the highest extreme. But the thing is, they're not allowed to explore. So, and it's not even necessarily by you as a parent, but with society, they've got this label as they're the high achievers. So what I see in these kids is they don't want to explore new things unless they know they're going to succeed. Even if it's something that would bring them so much joy and they know that, they don't know if they're good at it. So they're not going to give it a try. So they stay in this little jar, doing the things they need to do to achieve, and kind of the air gets sucked out of their life. But this is what I also know. For these kids, they get out of that jar from time to time. And when they do, it's usually making really poor choices. And I know this for a fact because I'm kind of privy to some Instagram feeds, some Snapchat feeds and stuff like that with teens. And some of the high achievers, the things that they're doing behind the scenes, their parents would never guess. Because they're doing this outside of their typical day, their typical label. So they get out there and they make these choices that are not the norm for them to feel free. So we don't want our kids making those choices, right? We want them to have the freedom to make good choices, but also choices that aren't necessarily, quote, safe, meaning safe in keeping them in their labels, all right? So imagine this. Imagine if your child, your teen, was able to have more space, even for your high achievers. How would they fundamentally be a different person? Would their confidence be impacted? Would their self-mastery be impacted? Would their willingness to try new things, to explore, to find their passions, would that be changed a bit? Would their inner joy have a chance to be sparked? And here's a big one. This is really key. How would your relationship with them change if they were able to have this space and this freedom? And even your own anxiety, I think, would probably go down because we as parents are almost over-invested in our kids' achievements these days. How would your child's life change forever if they were given more metaphorical space? Okay, so space. This is a big word, and it's one that I'm referring to a lot. So what do you think of when I say this term space? Like, what are the words that come to mind? And you can, again, put these in the chat. And I'll tell you some of the ones that come to mind for me. When I think of space, I do think like in this picture of an open field, but I also think of space, like literal space, where like out where the astronauts are, right? So I think of big, vast. And I think of like the freedom. Like think of being in this huge field where you can run around and play. There's the unknown too, which is exciting and kind of nerve-wracking at the same time. I also think of peace, peacefulness. And then this lightness, like not light like a bowl, but light like, you know, gravity light, like not heavy feeling. And then calm and quiet. So Debbie, you say the choice for the kids to do what they want and like and not limited, free. Oh my gosh, free, the word free and freedom, so important. So here's the deal. So over all these years and working with teens and with adults, I came up with a framework called SPACE, which is one reason I use this so much. But the reason I use that for my framework is because that term just kept coming up when I was talking to parents and talking to teens. So we're going to go through this framework quickly today. I can't go through it all in depth. We don't have time, but I'm going to go through it quickly for you. So the idea is that S is support, P is about their potential, A is assessment, C is connection, so super important. And perhaps the most important one is excitement, which of course feeds back to inner joy. Okay, so Veronica, you say you have a 14-year-old son and he gets too much of your attention, and there are power struggles, particularly with your husband, leading to general tension between all three of you, and you get really frustrated with the negative energy, yeah. And some of that can be that attention because, and it may be, I don't know, is he an only child perhaps, but yeah, we have to make sure that we don't invest all of our adult energy into our kids. There has to be that balance, right? We have to have our own life and then they have their own life. So we've got to let them kind of have that space to do their own things, whether it's at home, you know, how they're setting up their homework schedule, how they're getting their projects done, all of that. And that can take away, Veronica, some of that power struggle when you are giving them that space, okay? Let's go through these guys here. Ooh, every time I pull this slide up, I feel really anxious. I don't know about you guys, but this visual here, imagine you being in this small of a space, this bubble like the girl in this picture is in, unable to move very much. You can move a little bit, but not much, very constrained. How would this make you feel? Like really think about how you feel in that space if you're sitting in that bubble. Now, if this visual isn't getting to you, think about this. Sitting on an airplane flight in the middle seat. Oh my gosh, right? Like, sure, you can read your book, you can get on your phone, but you're in this space where you just have to keep right here to these confines. You can't wait to get out of that space, right? So what happens to you, like just looking, I'm a little claustrophobic anyway, but this visual and this thought just makes me feel like a little short of breath, quite honestly. And this really is what is happening right now. I mean, this kind of space makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you feel a little bit hopeless and sad and anxious for sure, and then a little bit lethargic too. And that is what we're seeing in our teens. Okay, this, I'm gonna try not to cry on this one. Every time I go through this slide, it just gets to me. This is what's happening to our teens, okay? So this is Washington State statistics, but nationally the statistics are very similar. If we bring this into an even smaller bubble into King County, the statistics are very similar. So let's look at this slide. So the pink one is 8th grade. If we look at the 8th graders here, 17% of 8th graders have considered suicide. This means they had a fleeting thought about it. They weren't necessarily serious about it. I actually think this statistic is probably higher, quite honestly. It isn't abnormal for teens to think of it in terms of, if I was gone, how would people react? So, but this is still very disturbing to me. But the next one is very disturbing as well. 13% of 8th graders have made a plan of how they would carry out suicide. Meaning they've thought about, I would use a knife, I would take pills, I would find a gun, I would, you know, whatever it may be, that they've really thought about it and visualized it. So that means they're getting more serious about it. The third one is 8% of 8th graders have attempted suicide. 8%. That is, I can't even believe that. And the statistic we don't have on this slide is how many successful suicide attempts there were. How many young kids died by suicide? Now I'll run you through 10th graders. 21% have considered suicide, 17% had a plan for suicide, and 10% attempted suicide. 12th graders, 20% considered it, 16% had a plan, and 9% attempted. These statistics are unacceptable. They're awful. These are 8th, 10th, and 12th graders we're talking about here. Sorry. Okay, so let's look at the fourth one, anxious and worried. So this is what I see. Like the ones on the left, the statistics are horrible. But this one on the far right, I think is where everything gets started. Like this anxiety and this worry on a constant daily basis is what then feeds into these thoughts of suicide. So 8th graders, let me see here, where are all of these? 8th graders, 53% were nervous and couldn't stop worrying. 10th graders, 65% were consistently anxious and worrying. 12th graders, 67%. These are really, really high numbers. And that's what I want you all to change in your household. Okay, so let's go back to space. Take a deep breath on that one. So when we talk about space, what is it that concerns you about giving your child space? Like, what makes it difficult to back off and to give them that space and that freedom? So why can't you give them more freedom? And give me your answers in the chat, but I'm going to tell you what I hear quite often from parents and teens. So the parents are afraid that if they back off, that their kids are going to fail. And failure is normal. It's something we don't want our kids to experience, but we need to let them experience. The kids who experience failure are stronger for it, and they know that with failure, no big deal, they can continue and move on. So we have to let them experience failure, okay? Many parents are afraid they're going to lose connection with them, that if they do back off and give them space, they're going to disconnect. But here's the thing with teenagers. They're programmed to push us away, and if we grab really tight and pull them in, they're going to push even harder. So by giving them space, it actually creates a better connection between you and your teen. Now, this isn't the case if you never talk to them, you never see them, you never interact with them, right? But when you're able to give them the emotional space that they need to become who they are becoming, your connection is going to get much stronger, right? And Debbie, I'm going to answer your question in just a second, okay? We're also afraid they're going to make bad choices if we give them space. And guess what? They are going to make some bad choices because they're teenagers and they are human. And it's our job to be there as the guardrails, to give them some space to make some choices, but not just open, the gates and say, go do whatever, right? The other thing is we're afraid they won't get into a good college if we're not right there micromanaging their academics. And also, here's the thing. Many parents feel like if their kids aren't making all A's, they're not overachieving, that somehow that they're not a good parent. And this is not the truth. Not the truth at all. All right, so let me answer your question. If they aren't diligent and they aren't great at making their own work schedule, that's when you work together, but you don't take it completely over. You have to be there to support them and guide them, but not to make them like be on the specific timeline. So if they aren't good at doing their homework, then you have a discussion of how can I help you to get better at that? What does your schedule look like? What is your plan to get your homework done? So you're turning it on them instead of on you. And you know what might happen if they do that? Then they just might fail a class. And then they have that natural consequence and they have to learn to make that up on their own. If they fail a class, they might have to take summer school, or they might have to be held back in that particular curriculum. So there's natural consequences, and they'll get through it, and they will learn from it. And it's better to learn now than in college. All right, Jessica, does backing off include unplugging them from their screens? You have two 13-year-olds, and when you give them space, they usually want to spend time on their phones. Kelly, you're worried she'll revert into herself even more, never try anything. Yes. So this is where we come in with both of these, okay? We are guiding them and we're there supporting them. We're not controlling them, but it also doesn't mean we're just like, go do whatever you want. So with cell phones, when I'm talking about space, some parents freak out and think, just let them be on their phones whenever. You absolutely, as a parent, have the right to set rules and regulations in your household. That's what you're for. That's how you become the guardrails. And so I'm absolutely about monitoring on social media, about being there to talk to them about it. It's all a matter of how much space you're giving them. So are you just shutting everything down and saying no cell phones, no social media ever? Or are you saying, hey, I'm going to let you have a phone, but we're going to be there together to talk about it so I can support you through that? And Kelly, about, her never trying anything, if you just give her the space, that again is how you can guide. Say, hey, I really want you to try some new things. So here's what the Redmond Parks and Rec is offering this summer. I'd like you to choose one. If you can't choose it, then I will choose one for you, but I really want you to find something that you're excited about. Or you can offer volunteering as an option, something, but you're mindful about she needs to explore. So there may be a little pushing that's needed there, or encouraging, let's say, not pushing, to get her to get out of her shell and try some things. But also be mindful. She may be an introvert, so she needs a lot of alone time, but she also has to explore. So, and you can definitely email me and we can talk about that more if you want to. All right, so let's move on to support. Support is the tricky one, right? But here's the thing. Research shows that if you have a high level of autonomy, meaning you feel like you are making your own choices, then your stress level is lower. So if your child decides completely on their own to take 2 AP classes, they're going to experience the stress of those classes a lot lower than if you as a parent said you have to take these 2 AP classes. And that goes for their sports, for their extracurricular, tutoring, all of that stuff. Whenever they feel like they have more control, even if it's really the same amount of stuff going on, their stress level is lower, meaning how their body is reacting to that stress. And as we know, it's very, stress is very negative on our body. It creates all sorts of issues, headaches, stomach aches, migraines, sicknesses, low autoimmune system. So we don't want our kids to be marinating in this constant chronic stress. So obviously the opposite, if they have more control, they have less stress. If they have higher stress, that means they feel like they have less control. And let's face it, our kids really, they don't have a lot of control in their lives. We tend to say they do, but the way things are kind of set up for most households and most schools, they just don't have a lot of control. So the more we can give them, the better. Let's see, would it be a good strategy to create a framework in every area and let them create their path in this? Absolutely. I mean, and when you say framework, what I would say is it's not like this is exactly how we're going to have it. Sit down with them and create that framework. So you can explain why you want them to sign up for some classes in the summer and then say, okay, I can either help you find these or you can find them on your own, but here's what I want for you to do on your own. So give them guidance and encouragement and be there as their support. So yes, I like your idea of the framework, whether it's on social media and having a phone and taking extracurriculars and what classes they take, just being clear on these are kind of our expectations. So let's work on this together and see how we can get there. Okay, so we're all well-intentioned parents, right? I have never met a parent that I was like, oh my gosh, they just have the worst intentions for their kids. I just haven't met them. I know they're out there, but I haven't met them. So, but very well-intentioned parents can become very intrusive and micromanagers for their kids' lives. And what this does is it takes away the power of decision, which we just talked about, right? Having that power of decision takes down the stress. And the thing is that we tell our kids you have control over your own lives, make your decisions, make good decisions, but what are they controlling? And that's where you as a parent can really think about, what are you controlling in their lives that you really don't need to control? It could be something as small as, what are they eating for lunch? You want them to be well nourished, of course, but especially when they hit high school, they need to learn how to feed themselves. So think maybe that's one thing that you can pull back on. Maybe how they're spending their leisure time, something like that, as long as it's not vaping or something like that. Are you okay with them playing Fortnite? Are you okay with them being on social media? Because that's the way that they want to spend their leisure time. So really think about that, okay? And then here's the thing, if your kid is struggling, let's say they're struggling in math and their grades are not great. Are you supporting or are you intruding? Here's a way to think of it. An intrusive parent would do this. My kid just failed a test. Okay, I'm going to hire a tutor. I'm going to talk to the teacher. I'm going to make them stay, an hour after school every day. When they get home, they're going to spend a half an hour watching Khan Academy. That would be an intrusive parent. A supportive parent would be, hey, I see that you didn't do really well on this last test you had. How can I help you? What support do you need? And there's so many things that are being learned in this. One is that they have the power to make some choices. They know that you're there to help them. They know that you're not freaking out because they failed. You're like, yeah, cool. What are we going to do next step? So think about how you would handle that situation right there. If your child came home and you realized that they had failed the test, how would you help to support them? And that right there is a small change that you can make. All right, and when it comes to support, this is a great visual, okay? So you see this big old rock in the middle of this river? So that's you. You need to be that rock, no matter what happens. So surrounding you there as the rock is water. Sometimes that water is going to rise. Sometimes it's going to fall. Sometimes it's going to get really rough and, the rough rapids. Sometimes it's going to be smooth and calm. That's your kid. So you have to stay this strong rock in the middle. You're a constant. You're sturdy. You're calm. That's what you need to be for your kids. So when they're going through a lot of things, especially emotionally, because their emotions are high. That's how they're wired. Their brain is wired to be highly emotional when they're a teenager. You have to stay out of that. You can have your own emotions, but do your freakouts in the bedroom on your own. Let your anxiety be your own issue. Don't pile that onto your kids' emotions. And when they come to you with an issue, let's say this one really triggers a lot of moms who dealt with like mean girl issues. If your child comes to you and says, starts talking about all these mean girl issues, don't dive in there with her emotionally, because your emotions then overshadow hers. And the problem is now yours. And the other thing that happens is she'll stop coming to you, because our kids don't like us to be upset. So if they come and tell us something and we get irate and crazy and crying, they're like, okay, I'm not going to do that again because I don't know how to deal with that. All right, now let's jump to potential. This is one that really trips us up as parents. So we get super excited when our kids have potential in something, right? And what I see every day is that parents are like, my daughter has the potential to make straight A's. I don't need her to make all A's, but she has the potential to do it, so she really should do it. And here's where we kind of get mixed up as parents. Potential is not always correlated with interest. Like, think of things that you might have been good in life, but you didn't go full Monty and go and like get a coach and do it professionally. So for our kids, sure, maybe they have the potential to make all A's. Maybe they have the potential to go to a summer camp for the gifted. Maybe they have the potential to skip 2 levels in math. Maybe they have the potential to be the star basketball player. But how much time and energy do they have? They don't have the ability to reach their full potential in every single thing in life, just like we as adults don't. So we have to be mindful of that. What we need to look for is, what are they excited about and what do they have potential in? And where those intersect is where we can really help to move them forward. And maybe they're excited about things and have no potential, and that's okay too. I have heard parents who have made their kids quit things because they'll say things like, you don't really have any potential to like move any more forward in that, like dance or gymnastics are the ones that I kind of see that, or a sport. Like, you're not very good at basketball. You don't have a lot of potential. We need to get you out of that to go do something else. So we have to really think of that. Right, and I'm going to give you a kind of a funny example in my own life. So I went bowling with my daughter. My youngest daughter is 15, and her friends. And I had 6 strikes in this game. You'll see it like in the bottom. Here's my proof. I am not a great bowler. I don't know why in the world that happened. I just happened to get these 6 strikes in a row. Now imagine if I was a teenager and I was bowling with my parents and they got so super excited saying, oh my gosh, you have so much potential in bowling. We're going to sign you up for a league. We're going to get you a bowling coach. We're going to buy you a bowling bag and get the bowling ball, some shoes. You have so much potential here. Well, that might freak me out because I kind of like bowling, but I don't want to be a professional bowler and I don't want to spend hours getting better at it. So we have to be mindful as a parent, are we doing that to our kids where we see the spark of potential and then we're just going fully forward on it in whatever way that looks like for your family. And by the way, the next game, I only had 1 strike and I scored 85. So it was fluke potential there. Okay, this is something that is super important for me to include in this, and this is about the whole idea of quitting something. Because if your kid tries something new, I know that a lot of parents say, I will not let them quit because they're not learning work ethic. But this is my take on it. First of all, when your kid tries something new, do set parameters of how long you expect them to be in it or how many sessions you want them to try. But I want you to think of it in terms of you. Let's say that you decided you wanted to try pottery. So you signed up for a 6-week class. You go to the very first class and you absolutely hate it. You liked nothing at all about that pottery class. What if I said to you, too bad, You're going to go for the next 6 weeks to this class. I don't care if you hate it or not. We signed you up. That would be probably like 18 hours of your life that I was making you go and sit and do pottery. So this is what we do to our kids. We say, you tried something new. Too bad, you're going to stick with it for sometimes it's 6 weeks, sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's a year. Sometimes once they get started, we don't want them to quit because it wouldn't look good for their college application. But there's so many lessons you can learn, or they can learn, from allowing them to quit. First of all, they have to own up to their responsibility. If they quit, they have to talk to the teacher, they have to talk to their teammates, they have to own up to their choice, not you. They have to do it. You can also put in some financial things. Sometimes parents will say, okay, you quit, then you're going to have to pay me back for the equipment. That's fair. I don't think you always need to do that, but I think it's fair. There's just so many things they can learn from it. They can learn that their time is the most valuable resource, right? So that they pick and choose how their time is spent. Now, yes, they have some responsibilities they have to stick with, but overall, that they are going to choose how to spend their time. I think this is so key. So don't just think, I can't let them quit because of work ethic. Think of all of the other lessons they can learn from quitting. But the most important part of letting them quit something is it frees up their time to find the things that they are excited about and the things that bring out inner joy. And when they do quit something, I think it's a success. They've learned all those lessons, but also they've learned one thing to check off their list of something they do not like. And this is how they begin to learn that muscle of exploring and being curious, because they're allowed to try out these new things. So I think that's something that we have to kind of work on. And I hear a lot from parents. I don't want them to quit because this will be good for their college application. There was one mom who I was talking to who wouldn't let her kid quit karate in 5th grade because the longevity of it would look good on the college application. Once we started talking about it, she was like, oh my gosh, what am I thinking? Of course I'm going to let him quit. But we just kind of get into that mindset. All right, I'm going to have to start talking really fast because we got a lot to cover here. So awareness is next. And this is simply about us as parents being aware of how we're showing up, what messages we're giving to our kids directly and indirectly. So one of these things are like, what are you role modeling? How are you showing up in the world? And also, what are your parenting priorities? Are you putting achievement before mental well-being? Like, is that first and foremost what's important? And every parent I ask that is like, of course not. But really think about in your daily life, what message are you sending to your kids of what is most important? All right, I'm going to skip this example here. We're going to go on to connection. So connection is super important, of course. We need to be connected to our kids to support them, to know what's going on with them, to kind of relay our values to them. This is key, and this is where I think a lot of people get tripped up, that giving space is disconnecting, and it's not at all. So here's one thing to think about. What is the first question that you ask your kids when they come in the door? Most people will answer that and say, how was your day? And their kids say, fine. And then the next question they would usually ask is, do you have any homework? So right there in that line of questioning, already we're saying what is the most important thing. Instead of taking time to connect about how they're feeling and doing all of that, we jump to homework. We also need to think about, how do we greet them? Are we excited that they're home? Are we excited to see them? Think about when they were 2. Oh my gosh, they were excited to see us. We're excited to see them. We give big hugs and smiles and laugh and all that stuff. We want to find that again. And part of it comes from, oh my gosh, my teenager's home. Is she going to be happy or sad? Is he going to be hungry? What is he going to want? We need to think about the fact we get these precious human beings in our household for only so many years. So we need to think about that in our connection and really relay that to them, that we're excited that they're there. So think about things that your child likes and connect with them about that. We talk about in my household beauty stuff sometimes, like makeup and things like that. We talk about the shows that they're watching. We talk about the music that they're listening to. So I really sit down and I take in where they are and what they're doing, instead of just like, I hate that music, I don't want to listen to it. Although I say that sometimes to them, we listen to their music in the car because we have a lot of conversations about it. So really connecting is about coming to their level, seeing what they're interested in, talking about it. If you have someone that likes Fortnite, you got to sit down and play Fortnite with them sometime. You don't need to spend hours, but it shows that, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing. I don't really like it, but I'm excited that you're excited. Now, here's an example. Let's say that you have a boss, and your boss only talks about deadlines. Every time you see him, he's like, have you finished it? Are you done? That wouldn't be very pleasant. You want him to also care about you personally. So ask yourself, do you want to be the boss of the household, or do you want to be the connected parent in the household? All right, last but not least is excitement. Excitement, parents, is the best predictor of success in life. If you want your kid to be successful, stop worrying about GPAs and what classes they're taking, and start thinking about how can you get your kid excited about learning, about exploring and being curious and all of those things. That should be your number one priority as a parent, of how to create excitement again for them. Because what I see right now is I see a lot of teens walking around with a fake smile plastered on their face, but sadness in their eyes. When you really ask them how they are, once you put that fine word, you say, how are you doing? They say fine. Get beyond that, and they're not doing fine. A lot of kids are very depressed and really feel like there's no point in any of this. With global climate, where all of that stuff, climate change and school shootings and all of these things that are going on, that they are privy to this information on a daily basis, they are feeling very down and low. So we need to create opportunity for this excitement. Because when you create excitement, what it also does is it creates curiosity. It creates a moment of exploration. It creates grit, motivation, energy. Excitement is much more powerful than a GPA. I can promise you that. There's tons of research around this too. Okay, so this is your homework assignment. I want you to ask your kids, if they had no homework and they had money constraints were an issue, time constraints were an issue, responsibility things were an issue, what would they do this weekend? Where would they want to go? What would they want to do? And most teens, when I ask them this, they have no idea. Like, this concept to them of having this freedom to explore is so foreign to them, they don't know how to answer this question. But ask it anyway, and it'll get them thinking about it. If they have no clue, then say, okay, I want to talk about this in a couple days, and let's see what we can come up with. And the other piece of the homework is, I want you to ask yourself the same thing. If you had no constraints, money, time, kids, responsibilities, what would you do this weekend? What would bring you inner joy? For some of you, it may be laying on the couch and watching Netflix the whole weekend with no interruptions. For some of you, it may be flying to Africa and taking photos of the beautiful animals, maybe laying on a beach, whatever it is. Think about what would bring your inner joy out and radiant. Because sometimes it's hard for us to think in those terms of what the possibilities are. And once you start thinking about this, I'd love to hear from you what your teens say and what you come up with. So email me your answers, okay? Because I want to hear what would bring you inner joy. So the next steps are for you to start creating the space in your life, the space for inner joy in your life and in your teen's life, and to see how your relationship starts to change, to see how their anxiety begins to lower, and to see just the difference in the dynamics in your household. You really need space emotionally from your child, even though you're there supporting them, and they need space to make their own decisions and to have their freedom. So begin to think about what it is in your life that you can do to make those changes. All right, I'm going to skip through some stuff here because I want to be respectful of your time, of course. Let's see. All right, so the other piece of homework that I'm going to give you is to have a conversation with your child. You know, we've talked about a lot during this webinar, and I want you to take this stuff and say, hey, I did this webinar today, and Coach Sheri was saying these things. What are your thoughts on these? And it's a really great way to open up a conversation and to get some ideas about what they're thinking about these things. Ask them where they feel like they need more space. Ask them how you're supporting them right now. And they may be like, great, Mom and Dad, you're doing a fantastic job. But they may want to tweak some things. So just open up that conversation, and there's so much to learn from your teenager. I'm learning every day from the teens I coach and from my own kids. And let me know what they say on those conversations too. It's really interesting to get their perspective on things, for sure. Just so you know, there are ways I can support you. I am in the process of creating a course for parents, an online course with some live coaching as well on how to make these changes, because there's a lot of stuff that we need to do to really make these changes in life and in our families. Most of them are small but impactful. So I'm working on that course. I don't have it done quite yet. There's also a ton of videos on my Parent Connection site. You can find all this on my website, by the way. And also, if you feel stuck right now in parenting, we can set up a 2-hour parent strategy course so I can walk you through some of this stuff. And if there's particular issues going on with your child, though, we can sit down and talk about those. And then, of course, I do private coaching with girls only, ages 8 to 18. We talk about finding their inner joy, finding their confidence. I deal a lot with friendship issues. So just know that I'm there for those things if you need my support on those. Okay, so we're at the end now. So I'm going to end with a quote. So I'm going to go through some of these slides here. So this quote kind of really sums it all up. And it's that the journey matters as much as the destination. So we need to be mindful that our kids are kids, our teens are teens, and we need to allow them to have this journey of being a teen and not skipping straight to college. We are so in this mindset for our kids right now that we need to prepare them for college, but we also need to let them be right now, to be. Like, we talk about mindfulness, but we're not teaching our kids that. So we need to really let them enjoy the journey that they're having right here and now, because it matters just as much as the destination. Thanks to all of you. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. I'm here for you. I am now a resource in your back pocket. So email me with whatever you need, book recommendations, resources, anything. I'm happy to be here for you. This is what brings me inner joy, is being here in service to all of you parents and to your teens. So have a fantastic day and get out there and find your inner joy.